In 1979, two welders worked the same shift at the same plant in Gary, Indiana, earning the same wage down to the penny. One retired at 54 with the house paid off and a paid-up pension supplement he built himself. The other worked until 71 and still carried a car payment. Nobody at that plant could tell you why, because the difference never showed up on a paycheck. It showed up in 18 small decisions repeated for 30 years. Number 12 was something his union stopped teaching new hires in the 1980s. Number 1 is the habit almost nobody admits to because it sounds too boring to matter. Before we start, hit subscribe because early retirement was never about the size of the paycheck. Number 18, calculating a real number instead of chasing a vague goal. Men who retired early almost universally sat down at some point in their 30s or 40s and worked out, on paper, exactly what their life would cost per month once the mortgage was gone and the kids were grown. Not a guess, an actual number built line by line. Men who never retired early tended to work indefinitely toward a feeling of enough, which by definition never arrives, because a feeling has no finish line and a number does. Number 17, treating the employer match as the first bill of the month, not an afterthought. Long before automatic enrollment became standard in the 2000s, workers had to actively choose to contribute enough to capture a full employer match on a pension or savings plan. Men who retired early treated that match as money they had already earned and were simply choosing whether to collect, and they never left it unclaimed. Passing on a full match was, functionally, refusing part of your own wage, and the men who understood that early never made the mistake twice. Number 16, buying a modest house early and staying in it. Men who retired at 55 disproportionately bought a house in their late 20s or early 30s that cost meaningfully less than what a lender approved them for, then stayed in that same house for decades, rather than trading up every time income rose. A mortgage paid off by 50 freed an entire second income stream for the last working decade, and that decade of savings, compounding at full strength with no housing payment attached, was often the single largest factor separating an early retirement from a normal one. Number 15. Avoiding the trap of financing a lifestyle upgrade with every promotion. A raise or a promotion is, statistically, one of the most common triggers for new debt. A bigger truck, a nicer house, a country club membership, because the new income creates room in the monthly budget that old spending habits rush to fill. Men who retired early consistently kept their spending roughly flat through multiple promotions, banking the difference instead, which meant that by the time they reached their peak earning years, the gap between income and spending had grown enormous rather than staying the same. Number 14. Running the numbers on a pension buyout instead of accepting the default option. When companies began offering lump sum pension buyouts in place of a monthly annuity starting in the 1980s and the 1990s, most workers took whichever option was presented as the default on the paperwork. Men who retired early were disproportionately the ones who paused, ran both scenarios against their own life expectancy and investment plans, and occasionally discovered the default option was worth tens of thousands of dollars less over a lifetime than the alternative sitting one line below it on the same form. First, pattern break. Everything so far has been about the money itself, how it was saved and protected. What comes next is different. These are the habits that had almost nothing to do with a dollar amount, and everything to do with keeping the body and the mind capable of actually enjoying an early retirement once it arrived. And this is where the two welders in Gary really started to diverge. Number 13. Staying in one field long enough to become genuinely difficult to replace. Job hopping every 2 or 3 years often resets a worker back near the bottom of a new pay scale, while staying put and becoming the person a department could not easily lose tends to compound both wages and negotiating leverage. Men who retired early were far more likely to have spent 15 or 20 years inside a single trade or company, using that tenure to negotiate flexible hours, better benefits, or an earlier exit than a newer hire in the same seat could ever ask for. Number 12. Learning basic home and vehicle repair instead of outsourcing every fix. This was standard shop class material through the 1970s, before many schools quietly dropped the courses, and men who retired early tended to be the ones who kept the habit going long after it stopped being taught. A furnace repair, a brake job, a leaking roof, each one handled personally instead of hired out, kept thousands of dollars a year inside the household that would otherwise have gone to a contractor, and that gap, held over 3 decades, was often the difference between retiring at 58 and retiring at 68. Number 11. Keeping health as a financial priority, not just a physical one. Men who retired early consistently treated preventive care, regular checkups, and staying at a healthy weight as part of their retirement plan rather than a separate concern, because a major health event in your 50s does 2 things at once. It drains savings, and it often forces an unplanned early exit from work at reduced income rather than a chosen one at full benefit. The men who retired on their own terms were disproportionately the ones who never gave a hospital stay the chance to make that decision for them. Number 10. Negotiating the terms of the exit years before actually leaving. Men who retired early rarely just walked in one day and quit. They spent the final 2 or 3 working years in quiet conversation with a supervisor or a benefits office, working out a phased reduction in hours, a bridge to Medicare eligibility, or a consulting arrangement that kept partial income flowing without the full work week. Men who retired late often discovered these options existed only after they had already left, when it was too late to structure an exit around them. Number 9. Keeping a side skill that could generate income without a full-time schedule. A welder who also did small metal fabrication jobs on weekends. A mechanic who fixed a few cars a month for cash. An electrician who wired the occasional garage. These side skills did not need to generate much. Their real value was optionality. A man who could earn a few $100s a month on his own schedule after leaving full-time work needed a dramatically smaller nest egg than a man whose only income source, once he stopped working, was the number in his account. Second pattern break. Now here is something the retirement industry tends to leave out of its brochures. Retiring early was almost never the result of a single high-paying job or a lucky investment. It was the compounding effect of small, unglamorous decisions, repeated with almost boring consistency for 20 or 30 years, that individually looked like nothing and collectively looked like freedom. The habits that follow are where that consistency turned into an actual exit date. Number 8. Increasing the savings rate every time debt was paid off instead of increasing spending. When a car loan or a credit card balance was finally cleared, men who retired early redirected that exact same monthly payment straight into savings, never letting it simply dissolve back into everyday spending. This single habit, repeated across every debt paid off over a career, meant the household's savings rate climbed steadily throughout their working life instead of staying flat, even as their actual take-home pay barely changed. Number 7. Reading the actual fee disclosures on every retirement account. Investment fees buried in fine print, often just 1 or 2% a year, sound trivial in the moment but compound into a staggering difference over 30 years, sometimes reducing a final balance by a quarter or more compared to a low-fee alternative holding the same investments. Men who retired early were disproportionately the ones who actually read the fee disclosure sheet mailed with their retirement statement instead of filing it straight into a drawer, and who moved their money when a cheaper, equivalent option existed. Number 6. Refusing to time the market in either direction. Men who retired early consistently kept contributing the same amount to their retirement accounts through downturns instead of pulling money out in a panic, and just as consistently avoided dumping in a windfall all at once, chasing a hot stock tip from a coworker. The habit was almost aggressively unexciting, a fixed contribution on a fixed schedule, regardless of headlines. And that unexciting consistency is precisely what let compounding do its work uninterrupted for decades. Number 5. Understanding exactly what Social Security and pension benefits would pay at different claiming ages before deciding. The difference between claiming Social Security at 62 versus waiting until 70 can mean a permanently higher monthly check for the rest of a retiree's life. Yet a large share of workers claim as early as legally possible without ever running the comparison. Men who retired early on their own terms had almost always done this math years in advance, sometimes structuring their entire final decade of work around bridging the gap to a specific claiming age that maximized their lifetime benefit. Number 4. Keeping a written record of net worth and reviewing it, not just feeling generally fine about money. A number tracked once a year, even roughly, catches slow drift long before it becomes a crisis and gives a concrete target to measure progress against instead of a vague sense of things probably being okay. Men who retired early nearly universally kept some version of this record, sometimes on paper, sometimes in a simple ledger, and used it to know with precision, not guesswork, exactly when they had actually reached the number they needed. Number 3. Avoiding lifestyle debt in the final decade of work specifically. The last 10 years before retirement carry outsized weight because money saved in those years has less time to compound, but every dollar of new debt taken on directly delays the exit date. Men who retired early treated their 50s as a decade to aggressively protect, not a decade to finally buy the boat, while men who never retired early frequently took on a new mortgage, a new vehicle, or a child's wedding debt in exactly the years that mattered most for the finish line. Number 2. Having a plan for what retirement would actually look like day to day, not just financially. Men who retired early and stayed retired rather than drifting back to part-time work out of boredom within a year or two had almost always built a specific picture of their weeks in advance, a hobby, a volunteer role, time with grandchildren, something with structure. Retirement without a plan for the hours in the day often collapsed back into work not out of financial necessity, but out of restlessness, quietly erasing years of careful saving in exchange for a paycheck that was never actually needed. Number 1, and this is the habit underneath every other habit on this list, treating the entire plan as non-negotiable once it was set, even when a specific year felt tight. Men who retired early describe the same pattern almost word for word. There was always a year, usually more than one, where the number felt too far away, where a friend's new truck or a neighbor's vacation made the sacrifice feel pointless, and the decision to keep going anyway, quietly, without renegotiating the plan every time it felt hard, is what actually got them across the finish line. Men who never retired early rarely lacked the knowledge on this list. They simply reopened the negotiation with themselves one too many times, and each reopening cost another year. Every habit here points back to the same idea. Early retirement was never really about a windfall or a lucky break. It was about deciding, years in advance, exactly what the finish line looked like, and then refusing to let any single year talk you out of walking toward it. The two welders in Gary earned the exact same wage for their entire careers. One of them simply decided, decades earlier than the other, what he was building toward, and then never stopped building it. The question is not whether you understand these 18 habits. Most people, if they are honest, already do. The question is whether you would hold to a single one of them for 30 straight years without renegotiating. Pick one and start this month. Then come back and tell me which one felt hardest to keep, because that is usually the one that decides everything else.